Greetings, dear viewers, and welcome back to a new edition of the Terra Venture podcast. Anthony Mars Jr. on Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan film with Terra Venture podcast episode 329. And if need be, also a re-recording of it because the original recording has been lost. So anyway, it's presented by my Morphin Megaverse Power Rangers Facebook group. Haven't joined? Check it out now. Well, this is going to be the only podcast episode I'm going to release this month because June has been pretty dry and dark for me, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about, today's subject. But before I talk about the future of Power Rangers, which is today's episode, I want to tell you guys what's been going on with me this whole entire month. Same as usual, going through quarantine with, the pandemic. But by the way, though, I am finally fully vaccinated against COVID-19. So if you haven't been fully vaccinated against COVID, I hope you do so, schedule and so forth, so we can beat this thing and get back to normal life. Because, this whole entire pandemic has been, very, depressed over how things have been this whole entire crisis. And I just lost all motivation making content for everybody. And I really realized that people do care about me and stuff. And I really should just stop beating myself up over something. And but although I'm glad that now that I'm fully vaccinated, I can finally get back to business. But though things with YouTube is very shady right now, given that most of my videos today are less viewed as usual because, times have changed, and given that people my age demographic don't really watch this kind of content that I do. But I hope everybody understands that my channel isn't really dead. It's just sometimes I need to take a break before I start making a certain video and then put it out there, even if the video's ancillary. So recall last summer when the Illuminati back in July of last year had brought up about a potential rumor or something that they confirmed on their own stance about Hasbro and Toei ending Power Rangers from adapting Super Sentai after Dino Fury. Now, I was one of the many fans that had to finally join a bandwagon about that, because I wasn't really sure about how Power Rangers would go on without using Super Sentai footage. But knowing ever since the days of, Mighty Morphin, Power Rangers have been using Super Sentai footage since Zyuranger, and that's been a really long time. Considering also that next 2 years from now will be Power Rangers' 30th anniversary, I figured that's probably why Hasbro wants to do something else with the brand after Dino Fury, given all the rumors and stuff that they may or may not do. So of course, the new movie, they're already planning a new movie, and they are likely also planning an animated version of the franchise, whatever that animated Power Rangers project would be. I don't know, a lot of this will be like Into the Spider-Verse, where Sony actually did an animated Spider-Man film, like in the vein of Into the Spider-Verse. We may never know. But given if you go back to my channel from last year with the slew of videos I did last year, one of my videos in particular was my response to the Illuminati, aka those guys from that hashtag show that were known for making videos about Power Rangers. And I saw their comments on my vlog about me calling them out about the rumors about Power Rangers no longer doing Sentai adaptations after Dino Fury thing, before Dino Fury would even start airing, but when they were in the midst of already start filming amid the coronavirus pandemic last year. And when we were in that huge wave of the pandemic with people dying and whatnot. And for them to bring that up about, what's going to happen with Power Rangers, like, is Hasbro really I just really hope that eventually we'll get a real confirmation from Hasbro if they will. Well, they did say so, but I'm going to hear a real word about it when we get to the second year of Dino Fury, and when we get to whatever plans for the 30th anniversary of Power Rangers will be for the comics, the TV show, the movie, the Lightning collection for the toy front and stuff. Because I want to know if they should continue doing Super Sentai adaptations or not of Power Rangers. Because there is a bunch of Sentais that have not been adapted yet. If you're going to skip these series, altogether, like Q Ranger, Lupin vs. Pato Ranger, and even the recent one that just came before our new 45th entry of the franchise, Zenkaiger with Kira Major, then that means this is it. They're not doing no more adaptations of Super Sentai for Power Rangers. I mean, I call that horse crap, in my opinion, because, Power Rangers has been very restrictive of, budget and Sentai footage all the time, but there have been times the show has had the money to shoot their own stuff, but even if they had to follow what was in the Sentai footage, some or most of the time, because, cost-saving measures. And also, how much money they have to pay their the respective cast members of each season every year or every 2 years, because that's just pretty much the gist of it all. I really don't want to see Power Rangers end on a certain note, is Dino Fury really going to be the last series to actually adapt Sentai footage? Well, there's a possibility like what I saw from Beast Morphers and a little bit of some clips and stuff and, bits and pieces here and there of Dino Fury that, you may not want to use the footage all the time, but you might as well just shoot your own footage of the suits with the monster suits of the following Sentai episode you're adapting from, shoot your own stories around that stuff, and just only cut straight to, for the final act of each episode, just only the fights with the Rangers inside the Zords, fighting that particular monster of the week they adapted for only an Americanized purpose. Because, and even though if the footage may be a bit too violent, or you just don't want to use that much Sentai footage, you can always just, again, shoot your original footage of that stuff. You don't have to use what was done in the Sentai, I guess. Because there's possibilities that Sentais like Zyuohger, Q Ranger, Lupin Ranger vs. Pato Ranger, and Kira Major can be adapted in the Power Rangers. But if you just leave those series altogether unadapted, then chances are we won't get those series. We'll just might as well see what's going to happen. I heard, rumor has it that they're going to do their own original Power Ranger stuff instead of, it's just still going to be called Power Rangers, but it's not going to have no Super Sentai counterparts attached to it. The last couple of times we did that was with the Titanium Ranger from Lightspeed Rescue, and of course the Spirit Rangers from Jungle Fury. And those characters were American-made Rangers that were not from the respective Sentai counterparts. So if this does happen after Dino Fury and whatever they're going to do for the 30th anniversary for the show and the movies, then so be it. Because, word has it that the next Power Rangers movie will be the start of what Hasbro's been planning about the movie front. Doing their own Power Ranger cinematic universe that's tied to the TV series. Or doing the movies that are tied to the shows like they've been planning, like how, again, based on my original recording of this until it got corrupted, about potentially if Power Rangers' movie shared universe with the TV show will be a thing in reality. Possibilities they'll probably do these movies in the show universe just like how Marvel has been doing with the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the movies and the shows simultaneously. Although my biggest criticism with the MCU shows of Daredevil and Jessica Jones, Iron Fist and Runaways and Agent Carter, so forth, is that in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they barely make references to the movies, and the movies don't really reference the shows. Well, the only shows that made references to the movies of the MCU was Agent Carter and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Well, Agent Carter with the first season because, Peggy Carter's show took place after the events of Captain America the First Avenger. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just came out just a year after the Avengers came out. And when that movie blew up and became a huge billion-dollar monster hit at the box office in 2012. And thus beginning this huge facade of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, it's possibility that they're going to do something like this with Power Rangers. So I guess with Dino Fury being considered the last iteration of what had been starting since Mighty Morphin, and then for Dino Fury being the poetic conclusion to this iteration, So I guess maybe if this is true about Hasbro, like ending the book of an era of Power Rangers and a chapter of Power Rangers where it's been adapting Super Sentai material for almost nearly 30 years, and so for the next 30 years and beyond until people like me of my generation die of old age and stuff, that Power Rangers will go a route that we'll never expect to come whenever we get those announcements next year, around the second year of Dino Fury, with plans of what's going to happen for the 30th anniversary. Because I really don't know what's going to happen. So we're just going to find out until we get to that point. But you know, over the years, I've been following this franchise as a child, growing up. And here I am, making videos about Power Rangers when I'm supposed to do my personal thing. I really hated the way how Power Rangers was in a certain manner. And I said this before in passing. But now we're in an era where Hasbro is trying to make things very, very unique and different now for Power Rangers that we'll never expect, though. But, I really, didn't like these newer seasons, and hoping that the Hasbro era will fix all of that. But I think after Dino Fury is done for 2 seasons, then again, I don't even know what's going to happen with that. Because when they... with all the stuff that Beast Morphers and Dino Fury is doing to clean up all the mess from the Neo Saban era. But, we already made the changes about, Power Rangers getting off Nickelodeon and onto something like Netflix or something. But I don't, again, like I said before, I don't do Netflix anymore. And then the movies being by Paramount and... so forth. But speaking of Paramount, because I really want to talk about, a little bit about their upcoming new movie, which will be our 4th Power Rangers theatrically released feature film. A long time ago, I once, if you don't know about my history being on the internet as a Power Rangers fan, when I started, basically was being a complete troll, that I did posted something trollish about if Paramount Pictures had movie rights about Power Rangers one day. And I really thought that, people would buy into something I was posting that, of course, was just all make-believe. But then I turn around now, when I think about the stuff I posted on the internet, on wikis and stuff about it, I realized... I guess I was being a troll, was I, in my early 20s when I did that. Late teens, early 20s posting that stuff. Yes, I was. So I'm going to have to confirm that. But now that the Paramount Pictures doing a movie about Power Rangers, but through Hasbro, is now a reality, but we don't know what the heck that movie's going to be. I know rumors about that new movie is going to be a time travel movie, time traveling back to when the show was at its peak back in the 90s during Mighty Morphin, and I know they want to try to recreate that nostalgic imagery of 1993-94 MMPR Season 1 through that movie based on the rumor possibility what that movie is going to be about, and have that movie actually tied to the television show, because the last time we had a Power Rangers movie that was tied to the TV series in continuity, likewise otherwise, was Turbo, a Power Rangers movie. And that was nearly come next year 25 years ago, because knowing Turbo was 24 years ago now, but next year will be 25. And that movie is supposed to be a bridge gap between the end of Zeo and setting up what Turbo was going to be in the time to come. But when we had the first Power Rangers movie, well, again, a lot of people thought that the first Mighty Morphin movie was canon to the show just because they had the same actors that played their characters, in that movie and stuff. But things were gradually different given its aesthetics and who had the rights to make the movie at that time. And then that 20th Century Fox, now known as 20th Century Studios. But... but yet again, no matter how good that 2017 Power Rangers movie was, although I kind of despise it for the choices and stuff they did in that, but you'll just never. But it's just I just have more strong nostalgia for the first 2 Mighty Power Ranger movies, knowing the fact Turbo may be bad, but I just recently watched it on HBO Max, and I never really thought, even in 4K HD, the Turbo movie still looks good in HD, even from when I watched it on HBO Max on my TV. And I never really thought about how, how bad that movie was. But when I look at it now as I got older, Turbo isn't as bad as I thought it was. Yeah, I still don't like the way how they introduced Justin as the Blue Ranger, demoting Rocky from that position. And then you got Jason and Kimberly being fan wank service in that movie, just because, the fan reaction at the time about Kimberly giving Tommy the Dear John letter stuff. But I just personally wish that that movie, I just wish that the first Mighty Morphin movie was in continuity with the show, even if that was an alternative, if based on the wish fulfillment thinking of if the first MMPR movie from 95 was to be like a alternative way of doing the Ninja Quest and have save Rito and Ninjor for like later episodes and have Ivan Ooze be the one that starting off the Rangers' quest to get the new powers and Zords at that point, kicking off the third season. And suppose we didn't have the Masked Rider team up, but it would still happen anyway, because who didn't think that Masked Rider would get his own show at that point? Even when we had the 2017 movie. But as much as I got so tired of hearing about news and all the other bells and whistles about that movie and stuff, and hearing all that news, because that's another reason why I got tired of that Power Ranger movie that we had a few years ago. It's because I was one of the many Power Ranger YouTubers when I was going through the rut that, ranting a lot about the Neo Saban era, the death and so forth, that, and also my own problems on this podcast and other videos, that I was doing a bunch of videos about the 2017 movie as everyone else was, because even before the movie was even coming out, and when they announced the movie, when they announced the cast, and when they announced the director, what the premise may be about, until we found out it was going to be a reimagining of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but not in the way you would expect it for that audience, for this generation. And even when the movie finally came out, I was already burnt out by all that news and hype about the movie. And when the hype died down, I know people wanted more out of it, but what more did they want? And when the movie flopped, I know people, the fans of that movie and all kinds of Power Ranger fans wanted to see a sequel to that movie. But I keep telling people on social media for years now that when we had that Power Rangers movie that Lionsgate and Saban did, it was a flop. And if it was a flop, why do you think it should still get a sequel? If a movie bombed at the box office, then no sequel or a potential franchise they said they were going to have. And I think the biggest regret that I think Saban and company should have never said about that movie is that, we should probably, if this, about like before the movie even came out, about talking about doing 6 or 7 movies after the first one, before that first movie we even hit it. Why won't they keep that potential sequel talk silent until if that movie did succeed? But while the film was a box office failure, fans still loved the movie. While critics were split on it, but Power Ranger fans love the 2017 movie. But I'm one of the Power Ranger fans that, at one point I liked it, but now as time went on, I'm like, I fucking hate it. Given some of the and also kind of hated with the fans who talk about that movie, knowing the fact it was just a one thing that they tried to do in an attempt of a potential movie franchise in the vein of the MCU, or trying to be like the Snyderverse of DC movies, but with Power Rangers. And now we're getting a fourth movie, and it feels like the fourth movie will likely, according to what Hasbro says, that it will be a connection to the television show. And and the more movies they do of it, they'll probably do what the MCU has been doing, and probably course correct what the Marvel Cinematic Universe could have done with the shows they had on at the time on Netflix and Hulu and so forth, like Agent Carter, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Daredevil, The Runaways, and Cloak and Dagger, and why the MCU movies like Avengers Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home and Captain Marvel and Civil War and Doctor Strange and Guardians 2 won't acknowledge those shows, but yet we know that Peggy Carter, a character from Captain America, the First Avenger, who had her own show, there have been plenty of references to Peggy Carter in the first and in the second and third waves of the MCU until her death in Civil War. So basically Agent Carter was more canon to the MCU. Say otherwise, because we haven't seen. Well, yeah, they did have Phil Coulson around a few movies of the MCU. But by Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's like, as time went on with that series, and once I finished watching that series by the final season, I felt like that show just doesn't want to acknowledge what happened during the events of most of those movies during Phase 2 and Phase 3. Now that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. ended, and knowing we were already into Phase 4, and knowing to the fact we didn't have a new Marvel movie last year because, again, the COVID-19 pandemic. But now that the Marvel movies that were supposed to come out last year are coming out this year, year. So now we're going to get about like what? 5 different movies of the MCU? No, 4 movies of the MCU. Let's see, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, The Eternals, and Spider-Man. So that's 4 movies of the MCU because the makeup for lost time, because last year was annihilated by the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. So there you go. But yet DC did put out Wonder Woman 1984 in the midst of the pandemic, but again, my movie theater was still closed and stuff, but now it's reopened. But now that we got that as the pandemic is about to slowly wind down, now in terms about the future with the television show of Power Rangers, if we ever do whatever the next season will be, if there will be a possibility that for the 30th anniversary season, will we finally get a team up? Well, that depends on the situation with the pandemic in other parts of the world, as like with here. But in terms of like over in New Zealand, because Dino Fury is not going to get a team up because why? Because we are still in this crisis. Even when they were still filming the show during the crisis, Dino Fury will make up having a team up with future Ranger with earlier Ranger teams for the 30th anniversary one day. If they will bring back any of those Rangers for that team up episode, potentially for that 30th Power Ranger season. And I'm not quite sure, given how I've been in the fandom for a long time, I don't even know if, for all the things considered with all the different continuities of Power Rangers we have from the television show, the 2 movies that are not canonical any means besides the Turbo movie, and then you got the comics, and then you got Hyperforce, and then you got all these different, just all of those parts of what we call the Rangerverse. Because now, as of the comics and Hyperforce and the 2017 movie and whatever this next movie is going to be, we have now multiple different continuities of Power Rangers. If you count like with the TV show with the different dimensions of Rangers outside of all the Ranger teams that are part of one dimension, while RPM and Dino Charge are the only ones in their separate dimensions, but they're still part of the television show. Nevertheless. So here's how I break it down with this. So given we got so many different continuities and different realities with Power Rangers through TV, through movies, through comics, and the tabletop RPG thing. Okay, so here's how I break it down with this. Now, I know I'm going to requote something like this similarly from a YouTuber, a Power Rangers YouTuber I was a fan of that got me inspired to do these podcasts. But I'm going to go ahead and do my insinuation of how I would break it all down. So what Hasbro is going to do. Now, I don't know, based on the movie continuity, will they do reboots of those teams that we had before? Or they're going to do teams made exclusive for the movies for the TV shows to acknowledge that exist. Because as of now, we only have 3 Power Ranger movies. You got the 1995 movie, you got the Turbo movie, which is canon to the show, and the only one until this 4th one, and the 2017 movie, which was just a modern movie reimagining of the franchise, whether if you like it or not. So, and then we'll be breaking it down with the television show, but again, with all the different versions of Power Rangers we have now. All of the seasons of the television show and the second movie, that being Turbo, are actually really part of Power Rangers. But what is not part of Power Rangers in terms of the main timeline of events, with that being the television show, here's the following ones that are not in continuity with the television show, even if there are expanded branch outs to it. The 1995 movie is not, canon to what the television show was doing, but it's just an alternate reimagining of what would happen in season 3. The 2017 movie is not in continuity with what was going on with the main storyline in any means, given that, again, is a reimagining of the franchise in film. I hate to say this with the Boom Studio comics, but one of the other things I don't really care about with the comics, and why I have to bring this up in this discussion, is that the Boom Studio comics, as much as they are so great with fans right now, and how everybody's eating up the comics the way they are, it's I'm one of the few Power Ranger fans in the minority that doesn't care about the comics. I know that characters like Ranger Slayer and Lord Draken and the Green Psycho Ranger and those characters from the comics exist, but you would think that, you know, like, oh, is the TV show going to acknowledge that the stuff that happened in, like, Shattered Grid and stuff exists? I mean, the TV show doesn't care about that stuff. I mean, even if the comics are an expansion to what the show could have done, because they were still doing Sentai footage, and again, the comics are like an expansion of what the television show has been doing for years, but it's set in modern day. But if the comics universe, you know, the Boom Studio Power Ranger comic universe was to take place by season, you know, yearly season, like if the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger comics we've had by Boom Studios were to be basically like, you know, take place in the year the season takes place, you know, I could see that. But given that you're taking aesthetics from what we've had by year every season, but put it in today's subtext and today's context and how these seasons would be done in comic books today, I think that's probably another factor why a lot of Power Ranger fans love the comics. But I'll delve more about the comics in discussion, but I'm talking about where does the comics take place in continuity with Power Rangers or not. But in my book, I don't really care much about the comics as much as, like, you know, how, like, because basically, like, I just don't really care much about the comics per se. As much as I like the artwork, I do like what they're trying to do with the franchise and trying to make it more mature. Because while the television show is still for children, but you also have people of all ages still watching Power Rangers like me. But when it comes to the comics, I can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to make Power Rangers more realized than usual, because at least because I think one of the other factors why fans love the comics than the television show now, I think in my opinion, is that the comics, unlike the TV show, doesn't rely on Sentai footage or budget. The comics have a lot of freedom to tell whatever stories it wants, but as long as it fits and belongs and feels like it belongs in Power Rangers. Because that's one of the reasons why, you know, when you look at the television show in comparison, it's so tame how every year you look back on a lot of these seasons of the television show that they were always using Sentai footage. They were always cutting corners. There's some things they were never going to adapt because, you know, of course, we're not Japan, we're America, we do things different. And also, even if we didn't get certain teams that, you know, from Sentai we never got for Power Rangers, like, you know, Q Ranger, Zyuohger, and make them be a part of the canon. But also branching out all those pre-Zoo Ranger teams that Super Megaforce bombastically haphazardly should have never brought up via footage, because, you know, Super Megaforce was so damn lazy not to explain where those teams come from. But luckily, I heard that some of these Ranger teams that Super Megaforce brought up that were these pre-Mighty Morphin Zoo teams would be a part of Power Rangers canon now, because, again, you know, with the comics, with how they were doing them. But, and then you also have, like, Hyperforce. Like, now, I know that from what I heard, Hyperforce is considered a sequel to Time Force. But, personally, I'm like one of the few people who refuse to regard Hyperforce as part of Power Rangers continuity in terms of the television show. But I'll talk about Hyperforce in the future when I get around it sometime later. But it's possibility that, like, if we get a huge, like, let's say Crisis on Infinite Earths type, you know, Power Rangers crossover, like if we did, like, in the vein of like Avengers Endgame or like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, they would probably bring all of the different versions of all the Power Rangers, mostly like Mighty Morphin or like a MMPR multiverse, you know, crossover. But knowing to the fact that, you know, it's going to be impossible and tricky doing the 1995 movie and the 2017 movie characters to be part of that, you know, crossover, you know, Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover for MMPR, where, like, you know, you got the main Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, part of the main timeline of stuff with the television show. Then you got the 1995 Mighty Morphin movie team. Then you got the 2017 Mighty Morphin movie team. You got the Mighty Morphin team from the comics. But it's going to be impossible doing all of that, you know, crossing over of all of the different versions of MMPR that we have. But whereas, you know, one of the things I really I'll delve into next time is about how like Mighty Morphin has so many different versions across the multiverse, but we only get one version of each Ranger team, like only one and only version of Zeo, one and only version of Turbo, one and only version of In Space, and so forth, and all those other teams that we have. And I hope eventually in the cinematic universe of Power Ranger movies with the television shows, or just do this, do the movies separately from the show instead of having the show acknowledge that the movies exist, that the movies should basically give us new versions of Ranger teams that I would love, that I always wanted to see as movies. Like, a new movie version, a new version of the In Space team, a new version of Lost Galaxies team, a new version of Turbo's team, a new version of Time Force's team, or even a new version of the SPD team, a new version of Dino Thunder in film and stuff like that. But yet we get so many different versions of Mighty Morphin that I wish that we had newer versions of the other Ranger teams I've mentioned within the Rangerverse. I mean, if you look at, like, let's say those Power Ranger fan films by Unworthy Productions and stuff right now, you see that they have, like, alternate versions of teams, not just Mighty Morphin, in those fan films. Well, even though I haven't been watching those fan films, but I'll talk more about the Unworthy and Shattered Past films and stuff later when I get around it, if I ever will, because I'm always about my Power Rangers fan film thing. But I gotta realize I gotta stop thinking about myself for once and think about other venues of the franchise for a change. But I just think that with Power Rangers going this route, but again with the adapting the Sentai stuff and not adapting no more footage. And I still want to retract what the Illuminati reported last July, because around this summer last year I did a vlog calling them out about it. And I know some people were negative about how I was coming off, I was sounding like a drunken dumbass or whatever in the video, based on whoever that person was, obviously a troll. Or two, and then some people were very supportive of what I had to call them out for. But while I had some people against me and some were supporting my thought about it. But again, until we get a real confirmation about it, then we'll see what happens from Hasbro themselves about what they say about after Dino Fury. Once we get to the 30th anniversary of Power Rangers, and here's to another 30 years afterwards, that I think Power Rangers should, basically just do their own stuff. And also, they've been having plans on talking about doing an animated version of Power Rangers. Okay, now I want to talk about how I feel about if they were to do an animated version of the franchise. I'm not that much of an animation buff, basically. As much as I grew up watching cartoons from my generation, like, all the cartoons I watched on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and Disney Channel, and even the cartoons that used to be on Fox Kids and Kids WB and stuff back in the day until I grew up. But when I look at some of that, even what Toonami on Cartoon Network, later Adult Swim, or Comedy Central with cartoons like South Park. But when it comes to animation, there is limitations and advantages and disadvantages when it comes to animation. But taking something that's been live action for a really, really long time and then make it animated, wouldn't that be a major departure of what Power Rangers always was? Because I understand that Hasbro, to be honest, when you think back to their history with their live action stuff of their properties like G.I. Joe and Transformers, they've been pretty much been hit and miss for the most part. Like, for instance, I understand that while Transformers was always animated with the cartoons and the comics and the toys and stuff, but the only successful branch of live action for a Hasbro property was Transformers. Well, as much as people hated the Michael Bay movies, but those movies still made money, and that's what put the Transformers franchise back on the map, even if you hate those movies or not. But regardless, though, Hasbro rather wants to do something animated with Power Rangers as opposed to, let's say, G.I. Joe, Transformers, My Little Pony, and their even more defunct but abandoned and forgotten about lost relic of theirs, Jem and the Holograms, although that was just a short-lived thing, in which I already talked about in a video before back in passing about Jem and the Holograms, which is a Hasbro property that was for girls outside of MLP. But for boy properties like Transformers and G.I. Joe and some others, but mainly Transformers and G.I. Joe, it's like you know, they worked well in animation, but bringing them in live action was pretty risky. Transformers was pretty risky to do in live action, given how people were very against what Michael Bay had been doing with those movies. But people went and saw those movies anyway. They made money, and the toys sold a lot well and stuff. But when it was G.I. Joe, in comparison, it's like, you know, yeah, compared to the Transformers movies, G.I. Joe, you know, given also we're like, I can't believe we're like weeks away from that Snake Eyes movie. And also, something tells me that Snake Eyes movie ain't going to do well at the box office. I can tell you now, because given the fact people's interest in G.I. Joe is kind of dead at this point. If it weren't for those goddamn Channing Tatum-led G.I. Joe movies from, you know, a decade and a half ago, you know, G.I. Joe wouldn't be where it is right now. But knowing the fact those movies tried to make bank and tried to make it like the Transformers film franchise in live action. But I think personally, like, if they, you know, but anyway, back to the animated thing of Power Rangers. But if they were to go with an animated, let's say, Power Rangers movie franchise in the vein of the DCAMU, I can see Hasbro doing something like that with Power Rangers. But I just hope that, you know, if anything for an animated Power Rangers, I just want a good quality animated Power Rangers show. I don't mean like some stupid, dumb Flash animated cartoon with all that stupid comedic antics that are just lowbrow and juvenile for only little kids. But just do an animated Power Rangers in the vein of how the DCAMU did it, because I like the DCAMU with the films they did, like Batman vs. Superman, Batman Bad Blood, Superman Doomsday, you know, Superman, the Death of Superman, Reign of the Superman, Justice League Dark, Justice League War, and all those other films of the DCAMU. And I can see Hasbro do a Power Rangers animated film of Shattered Grid that way. Probably choose one of them as an inspiration, because for all the times I keep hearing about how people who read the comics and read Shattered Grid talk about how they want Shattered Grid to be an animated movie, like, you know, yeah, because given Shattered, you know, again, Power Rangers, it may not be Marvel or DC, but it's trying to be those things. But knowing as much as I love this franchise, it's still going to be considered a niche among those who don't care about it. And for those who also love this franchise, but mainly the general public. But now that the comics have been branched out to make Power Rangers more mainstream, but it's just it's kind of weird and difficult where the franchise is heading right now. And I know that maybe I'm just, you know, I've been a bit, again, I'm trying not to be too cynical here, but I can see what they're trying to do with the franchise, because this franchise has just been stagnant for a number of years with the same old formula and, you know, with the TV show. So I think it makes sense for me to open up more on why we need other versions of Power Rangers and other takes on the property instead of just the same old thing, the TV show. Because while the TV show can just remain on autopilot, every other fan right now, well, unlike me, because I'm still doing my thing for the longest time, is more branched out onto the comics and is fans of the comics, and well, they're still a fan of the franchise overall, but like with the comics and that movie, and then we're going to get a new movie, and then all this other stuff that we had. I can see what Hasbro is going to do with this franchise about doing an animated Power Rangers project. But if you're also going to do an animated film, maybe probably take Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse as an inspiration, because I loved Into the Spider-Verse. Now, at first, I was very against an animated Spider-Man movie, but then when I saw trailers and stuff for Into the Spider-Verse, and when I went and saw the movie in theaters in a pre-COVID life in 2018, I really enjoyed Into the Spider-Verse. I really liked it. But maybe you can take some inspiration from that movie to make your animated Power Rangers thing, movie or show, animated otherwise. Because knowing the fact Hasbro doesn't really like doing live action all that much. Because you know how we felt as general public people with the Transformers and G.I. Joe live action films. And even with Jem and the Holograms and Battleships live action films. You know, I was also very against the fact that, you know, again, I'm not really much of a big expert when it comes to animation, but, you know, I can see them doing an animated Power Rangers project like they've been saying, because, Hasbro doesn't like doing a live action Power Rangers all that much. I mean, they're already adapting the show, but, based on the rumors and stuff, like, oh, they want to do an animated Power Ranger show or movie thing. They wanted to do a cinematic universe that's tied to the show when they're not doing no more Sentai adaptations, when they create their own original team of Rangers that are not based on Super Sentai. If they take notes from when Saban created the Titanium Ranger, for example. Like, the Titanium Ranger, you can see why he worked, because he was a Power Ranger that had no Super Sentai counterpart. So I guess maybe that's probably why Hasbro wants to do with that. Like, it's still going to be Power Rangers, but they're not going to have, like, a Super Sentai counterpart. But, I'm so going to be so against that by the time if we get a confirmation that they're not going to adapt the following Sentais. I want to see that we've been skipping a lot for Power Rangers, like Zyuranger and Q Ranger and Lupin vs. Pato Ranger and Kira Major. And next thing you know, when Zenkaiger is done and over with and whatever the next Super Sentai will be next year, that they'll probably skip Zenkaiger also. And, all of this skipping Sentai stuff has been hurting Power Rangers a lot. And I also think that also for the future of the franchise, and based on this current discussion, I think that the next thing I wish that Power Rangers should do now, going forward after the 30th anniversary stuff and whatever, and even with the show now transitioning from broadcast television after being on it for 28 years on broadcast TV to streaming services, and when Dino Fury is done and over with, I want Power Rangers to move away from the Mighty Morphin nostalgia callbacks and harken backs. Because when we had the franchise on Nickelodeon since, when Saban got it back from Disney in 2010, 2011, starting with Samurai, and all the way to now Beast Morphers and Dino Fury under Hasbro's hands with the brand, I just got sick and tired of the Mighty Morphin harkening. I said this before, and I know this is me treading old wounds again, bringing up old wounds again. But I just really want Power Rangers, going forward for the next 30 years to stop making so many Mighty Morphin references. Nothing wrong with callbacks to the original series. Nothing wrong trying to make your villains trying to be the next Rita and Lord Zed of each passing new generation. Or have a mentor to be the next generation Zordon or something. But there'll never be a new generation Zordon. There's only one Zordon, or even one Rita and Zed, or one Tommy Oliver. So you got to realize that we can't do what was done back then. And I know a lot of franchises today have been, a lot of franchises that have been going on for a long time before the 20th century have been doing that, because knowing the fact I should be grateful that I was born in a generation, in a century before the 21st, because even once I got to 2 to 3 decades into the 21st century after my birth in the 90s, that a lot of the stuff from my generation and even long before have been lately now has been hearkening back to their past times, while we have newer stuff, because everything's so creatively bankrupt and stuff, that I wish that Power Rangers, and the same go for other brands like Star Wars and stuff and Transformers, would stop branching off and trying to hearken off of that nostalgia, because I think that's what's hurting. I understand us the older fans of those things are still alive until the day we die of old age and stuff one day, and whenever we die. But I'm just like, I wish that they would stop branching off of that nostalgia and realizing that kids of today and younger people of today don't care about the old stuff all that much. Even though if they do, show them and say that, our stuff from back then is way better than whatever they were growing. Well, that depends. Like what you like. But I just wish that for the next season of Power Rangers after Dino Fury, well, it makes sense for the 30th anniversary, still use Go-Go Power Rangers when it's the anniversary. But after the 30th anniversary, stop using that stuff, because it's like, I think that's what's making Power Rangers go down a much darker well, to the point it's just becoming a laughingstock in my book. And I'm not saying it like a ranting raver like I was in the past, but I'm just saying it just to be concise. And I understand it's part of the brand, but if you just keep using Go-Go for the theme song and stuff every year, then it makes me not want to watch it anymore. If you're going to keep using those references and have comic relief characters trying to be Bulk and Skull 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, whatever, then you're just making Power Rangers repeating what was done before. But even though that's the problem, I also think another thing I want Hasbro to do for the future of this franchise is to stop trying to harken on what Mighty Morphin did in the 90s. Because what I know, Hasbro didn't even have Power Rangers back during season 1, and Noah Saban created Power Rangers by adapting it from Super Sentai since season 1 with Zyuranger. So what do I know? So therefore, I just want this franchise to stop these things, because in order for Power Rangers to have this renaissance that we have with Beast Morphers and Dino Fury and everything else, what Hasbro's doing with the brand with the Lightning collection and stuff, I just wish we just would move away from what we were doing from that practice with the Neo Saban era and when the show was still on Nickelodeon, and onto something else. And now that the transition from Nickelodeon to Netflix is happening, I just think that we need to basically move beyond that stuff, move beyond those points, because what is done is done. And I think by the time we get to 2023, 2024, I hope we see a huge new resurgence with the brand. And I just hope that, I just want Power Rangers to stop being so creatively bankrupt, and so is other brands like Star Wars and Transformers and some other franchises that are branching off their nostalgia and their pastimes and stuff, while you still got new stuff to put out and stuff. But that's another reasons why everything this generation of the 2010s to early 2020s has just been all about nostalgia. And then you got the rebooting, and then, well, maybe unless we just have to accept it, because our economy and everything and companies are just in bad shape. I know I may sound like I'm talking out of my ass about this, but I may not be college educated to understand all this, because I'm just thinking from what I can tell from off the streets. But it's just, and from what I can tell, because I be on the internet all the time and hearing from what other people be saying, but without further education. But you just get what I mean, because I've been in the fandom for as long as I can recall. But it's just I'm just really tired of it. And I mean I still love Power Rangers, I still do, but I just feel like that's with all the stuff that's been happening since, actually ever since after Super Mega Force, and since Dino Charge all the way to today, we've just been like, oh my god. And to the point I wanted to quit and move on to something else, like, I don't know, Game of Thrones or something, because Game of Thrones has it's HBO, it's pornographic and violent in nature and stuff, and even like anything on Disney Plus and HBO Max. So there you go. And basically, I really want to, also, I know in the original recording I was calling out the Illuminati and want to call them out for their bullshit a year later, but I did bring them up in one point. But I just really wish that, like I said before I close out, if Hasbro does say that after Dino Fury, that is it for Power Rangers adapting Super Sentai footage after 28 and a half seasons, then 28, 29 and a half seasons going on 30, then that means, well, yeah, they are going to say they're going to do what they're going to do, but the TV show must continue doing that. You can just only adapt the Super Sentai show of the season that you're going to do for Power Rangers, but just don't use that much footage. Do your own stuff while around that material, like the costumes and props and stuff, but only use a little bit of Sentai footage, only restricted to the Zord stuff, with the Rangers just using the Zords. But, I mean, it worked for the last 2 seasons of Mighty Morphin, so maybe, even what I've noticed from like I said earlier, from Beast Morphers, and a little bit what I'll see from Dino Fury, that you're adapting the Super Sentai counterparts of these Power Ranger teams, but you're actually shooting your own original stuff with those costumes and props and stuff, and doing your own stories, and the Sentai footage only being the Megazord fights. Because, I've seen that in Beast Morphers, while they did use bits of some Sentai footage in that season, in those 2 seasons of Beast Morphers. But when I get to Dino Fury, well, the reason why they're reshooting a lot of original material, because the Dino Fury Green Ranger, when I watch it, yes, is a girl, but I'll talk more about Dino Fury when I get around it in the future, because I haven't been caught up on it yet. So I just hope that they take some word of advice from a fan who is very unknown and very uncouth. But I just hope they understand, hear from what I have to say about this. I just want Power Rangers to keep on adapting Sentai, no matter the cost. Just use less Sentai footage. Just adapt the suits of the Sentai teams you're doing. And even what they said about Q Ranger not being adapted. Oh, Oh, please. I mean, one of the reasons I heard they said they're not going to adapt Q Ranger is because, the Yellow Ranger's visor is too sharp and is a dangerous hazard. How about this? Now that it's been 4.5 going on 5 years come next year since Q Ranger ended for Sentai, all the costumes and props Q Ranger had are already long destroyed. Sentai already long moved on past that now. Same go for Zyuohger, but mainly with Q Ranger. But, if you don't want to use that pointy, sharp version of the helmet, or if you don't want to adapt Q Ranger, how about just, if you're going to recreate the Yellow Ranger's helmet, how about, make a plastic version of the visor? So that way it wouldn't be such a dangerous hazard. Yeah, because given that the Yellow Ranger and Q Ranger's Zord is a swordfish Voyager, a swordfish Voyager Zord, less sharp, or just trim down and recreate the helmet where it doesn't look pointy. Don't use the Sentai footage of him with the pointy visor because, or when you're doing them in the original footage. And also, knowing to the fact that possibilities if Q Ranger and Cure Major does get adapted, considering we have a female Green Ranger in our core group for our current team of Rangers now, if Q Ranger and Cure Major do get adapted in the Power Rangers, knowing that those two teams have female greens in them, female members that are green, I can see them adapt those teams to follow Izzy, the Green Dino Fury Ranger, and when they adapt the Green Ranger from Q Ranger that's a female, and the Green Ranger from Cure Major that's female, then they can follow suit on to with that. And another possibility, a future possibility for our 30th anniversary, maybe they should keep on if they do continue adapting Sentai. I think they should just move forward with Cure Major after adapting Ryusoulger for Dino Fury, and realizing that after Ryusoulger was Cure Major. And knowing Cure Major, I haven't even seen that Sentai yet. I'm still behind on Sentai, people. And I really want to see them adapt Cure Major, and also for the 30th anniversary, and make it like Ninja Steel. Its Sentai counterpart may not be the anniversary season, but make it an anniversary season of Power Rangers nevertheless, and take some elements of take some elements of Zenkaiger's anniversary stuff, but also try to course correct the mistakes Saban did when they did Megaforce and Super Megaforce. Instead of Frankensteining the two Sentais, doing one season as Cure Major footage, season 2 is Zenkaiger, how about just take little to so elements of Zenkaiger while everything is all Cure Major footage focused, and realizing that you can still do some anniversary stuff from Zenkaiger, because knowing Zenkaiger has Zord-based Rangers that are based on Megazords that are from the Power Rangers era of Sentai, like a Zord Ranger that's based off Daizujin, aka the original Megazord, for example. You can probably take some elements of those things from Zenkaiger, but everything is all Cure Major. The pay homage and celebrate the 30th anniversary of Power Rangers. Maybe you can do that with but try not to make the same mistakes Saban did when they did Goseiger and Gokaiger with Megaforce, and when they adapted those two Sentais, and look what we got with the end result. Because now that with Power Rangers on Netflix, there's possibilities that Hasbro will probably do something with Power Rangers going forward. I don't know if Netflix will give them a 2-year contract to do the same seasons every year. I don't know what's going to happen, and in the future will tell whenever the number amount of episodes we'll get for a season of Power Rangers. Because lately, over the years since the Disney era, the episode count for seasons of Power Rangers have been reducing every year, from 38 to 32 to 22 a year. But when I think about it, when you condense the 2 seasons of Samurai Megaforce, Dino Charge, Ninja Steel, Beast Morphers, and Dino Fury, they're actually 40 episode seasons, but they just ran for a number 2 years. So I don't know what's going to happen with Netflix. And now that Netflix is doing Power Rangers exclusively now, but knowing that they already got rid of the remaining seasons that they took off earlier this year, I mean, chances are, I don't know how many episodes they're going to do a season. Maybe, 20 as well, or 19 episodes a season, or 13 episodes a season, but then that would cut certain episodes and certain stories short. I mean, yeah, most majority of Netflix shows are always 13 episodes a season, but if they do Power Rangers that way, I'm like, damn. Well, I guess, given that we don't have, it's like, they should have the money to do more episodes than that, because I really miss the days when Power Rangers used to have 50, 40, 30 episodes a season, but lately it's just been 2 seasons and 20 episodes a year, and I just wasn't feeling it, to the point now I just want to watch Sentai or just move on to something else or nothing at all, and just until the day I die and stuff, and just, and then life goes on without me after that. But it's just like, I'm just really tired of the stuff we've been doing for the last 10 years. But even with Netflix doing Power Rangers, I think they're going to do another 2 seasons, but things are going to be very different. We don't know what's going to happen. Possibilities and all the, infinite possibilities are up in the air for this franchise going forward now after Dino Fury. But now that Dino Fury is done, finished filming, season 1 isn't finished airing on Nickelodeon just yet. But when season 2 starts airing, starts streaming exclusively onto Netflix, we'll see what happens. What Hasbro is going to say with Power Rangers going forward after Dino Fury is done and over with. But until then, we'll see what happens. So I hope you guys, had the time to hear what I had to say, even though I was may have said stuff that make me sound incoherent and such as usual. But let me know what you guys think about this, and be sure to subscribe and drop a like, and there will be more videos about this kind of stuff to come. So let me know what you guys think about the future of Power Rangers, and I'm all for now. So anyway, this was Anthony on Power Rangers Lost in Galaxy Fan Film, signing off, and I'll see you guys next time with another installment of the Terra Venture podcast. Thanks for watching.